wonder sometimes if the leaders of these strange doomsday cults and rapture-ready predictors realize just how ridiculous they sound. And how many of them do you think are sincere in their beliefs? And how many are just taking advantage of people's money and exploiting their female followers, including underage girls, for sex? And how much Nike stock did Heaven's Gate purchase before checking out? Now today, we are here to talk about and even celebrate Teotihuacan. Now Teotihuacan has become the catchphrase for all of the end-of-the-world hysteria, predictions, and silliness. And Teotihuacan literally means the end of the world as we know it, which, of course, was made famous by the REM song of the same name. Now, I think we all know what to look for at the end of the world as it comes around. It starts with an earthquake, birds and snakes, an airplane. Lenny Bruce is not afraid. I have a hurricane, listen to yourself churn. World serves its own needs, regardless of your own needs. Feed it up and knock, speed, grunt no, strength no. Ladder, structure, clatter with fear of height, down height, wire and a fire represent the 7 games and a government for hire in a combat site. Left her wasn't coming in a hurry with the furies breathing down your neck and team by team reporters baffled Trump tethered crop. Look up at that low plane. Fine then. Uh-oh, overflow, population, common group, but it'll do. So save yourself and serve yourself because the world serves its own needs and listen to your heart bleed and tell me with the rapture and the reverent and the right? You vitriolic, patriotic, slam, fight, bright light, feeling pretty psyched. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. Now, if you apply the Bible code to the REM song, what you get is Tiger, Charlie, Blood, Winning, and Sheen. And don't forget about the zombie apocalypse. Now, have you picked your zombie survival team yet? Now, you pick 4 people who you think will help you survive the zombie apocalypse. And make sure that they have the skills you need and can also help you reproduce and bring mankind back from the brink of extinction. Sorry, gay guys, you're kind of left to your own devices during the zombie apocalypse. Killer hair, great pants, and the ability to design a great-looking shelter are not qualities we'll need. Now, unless you violated the don't ask, don't tell policy and have some serious military skills, that is. Now, there are some few rules you need to know about to prepare for the zombie apocalypse. First, get yourself a copy of the definitive survival guide, aptly named The Zombie Survival Guide, Complete Protection from the Living Dead. Now, it lists all of the necessary rules and how to set traps, etc., and you can also use some of the rules from the movie Zombieland, but they're not inclusive enough, and Zombieland made a huge mistake. They included a child in their group of 4. Now, my rules include no children. Children slow you down. They make noise, and they attract zombies. Now, adults will throw away their basic survival instinct to protect children and die doing it. There will be plenty of time later to make new children after the zombies are killed or finally die of starvation, which is why you should have at least 1 woman in your group of 4. And ladies, I'm sorry, but you have to have sex with every living male because we have to diversify the gene pool. Okay? Now, if you see a non-zombie child during the zombie apocalypse, do him or her a favor and double tap. Now, my other rule for the men is to be wary of good-looking women during the zombie apocalypse because great breasts and legs do not mean she's not a zombie. 10 basic rules to remember. Stay calm. Panic is your worst enemy. Panic will override common sense and logic. Keep your wits about you. Stay in shape. If you can, so that you can outrun zombies. They'll be slow, especially the injured ones. Use that to your advantage. Secure your safe place. The fewer entrances, the better, but always at least 2 entrances so you have more than 1 exit. Get out of town. The more populated the place is, the more zombies you have to deal with. But don't go so far out of town that you can't get back to it in a pinch to resupply your supplies. Keep your exits in mind always. And make sure you have an exit strategy. Don't get caught in a zombie quagmire. And if somebody gets bit, kill them without hesitation. They're going to turn. So save them the suffering and don't put your group in jeopardy, even if it's your own mother. And make sure you gather food, water, fuel, ammunition, extra guns, flashlights, batteries, etc. And keep some of them in a portable container that can be taken quickly in an emergency evacuation of your safe place. And listen to the radio for broadcasts from other survivors, especially the government, unless you're a libertarian, at which point death by zombie is better than a government handout. And don't count on a rescue. Make a long-term plan for survival, moving to a new location, starting a new society, etc. And if any of the survivors that are with you threaten the survival of anyone else, kill them without hesitation. Think Rockhound, played by Steve Buscemi in the movie Armageddon. You don't tie the crazy person up. You fucking kill them. And as far as 2012 goes, just watch the movie and you'll be fine. Unless you're a libertarian. Then you'd rather die in the cataclysmic flood than take some Noachian handout from the government. But let's look at the serious side of the doomsday cult, rapture predictions, apocalyptic fortune-telling, and general lunacy that takes place and how it affects people. Now, Sean touched on this for a second, and Sean was overly optimistic, I think. A more serious question that comes up when discussing doomsday cults or apocalyptic cults and religion is what's called disconfirmation continuation. A disconfirmation continuation means how they deal with the reality that sinks in the day after their predicted rapture, apocalypse, or end of the world fails to happen. It really boils down to cognitive dissonance, as postulated and theorized by Leon Festinger. Now, Festinger was a social psychologist who studied doomsday cults, and with fellow psychologists Henry Ryken and Stanley Schachter wrote a book called When Prophecy Fails, about a UFO cult who believed the end of the world was coming. Now, Dorothy Martin, who later became known as Sister Thedra, an appropriately alien name, used quote-unquote automatic writing to receive messages from aliens who told her the world was going to end in a cataclysmic flood on December 21st, 1954. Why is it always December 21st? She garnered a lot of followers, and on December 21st, they all sat waiting for the arrival of the aliens from Clarion to take them away. Now, we know a lot of the details of what happened because Festinger's group was infiltrated, or Dorothy Martin's group was infiltrated by some of Festinger's interns. At 12:10 a.m. on December 22nd, with no alien or spaceship in sight, the believers are stunned and speechless. And around 4 a.m., members of the group try to explain the lack of alien visitation in the world's end, but none of the theories were working. And Dorothy Martin began crying as she realized that she had failed. At 4:45 a.m. on December 22nd, Dorothy Martin received another automatic writing, and the writing stated that God had spared Earth from destruction thanks to, quote, the little group sitting all night long had spread so much light that God saved the world from destruction. The group had a newfound hope and inspiration to recruit more people because they believed they had saved the world from destruction. Now, the failure of prophecy had the opposite effect of what we would expect it to have. Instead of destroying their faith, it renewed and rejuvenated it and gave them a new, higher purpose. Now, cognitive dissonance is the uncomfortable feeling people get when they believe in conflicting things at the same time. And they rid themselves of cognitive dissonance by altering one of the conflicting beliefs or ideas, or by shifting cognitive dissonance through blame, justification, rationalization, or just outright denial. What we see in many doomsday cults is that they justify the failed prophecy and then revitalize their movement. And we see the same thing with the Church Universal and Triumphant, which was started by Elizabeth Clare Prophet. Now, the church predicted a nuclear apocalypse would occur on April 23rd, 1990. They directed members to build underground shelters and stock them with supplies. And when the nuclear war failed to happen, the church said that it was their prayers that averted the war. And during the 90s, the FBI investigated the church for stockpiling weapons, specifically AR-15s, which is a semi-automatic weapon, and 2 armored personnel carriers. Not quite sure what you need an APC for when the rapture happens. Now, while membership has decreased over the past 2 decades, there are still active church centers in cities across the United States. And Elizabeth Clare Prophet died on October 16th, 2009, suffering from advanced Alzheimer's disease. Clearly, God loved her. Now, unfortunately, we see the other aspect of doomsday cults when their predictions fail to happen. The movement for the restoration of the 10 Commandments of God was formed in the late 1980s by Credonia Morende and Joseph Kwabwiter, after they claimed to have visions of the Virgin Mary in Uganda. And Morende and Kwabwiter predicted that the apocalypse would happen on January 1st, 2000. So they did what any good failed psychic would do when it didn't happen. They changed the date to March 17th, 2000. Now, they didn't have much of a choice since questions were being asked, members were leaving, and most importantly, donations were drying up. And as members flocked to the churches on the 17th, the leadership poisoned them and then killed all of them. The main church exploded and burned with all the windows and doors boarded up to prevent escape. 530 people, including dozens of children, were killed in the main church. In addition, people were poisoned, stabbed, and murdered in several other churches owned by the group. 153 people were killed at Buhananje, 155 at the Katiribabo, and 81 at the Namurundo farm, and then 6 bodies at the Kanungu compound. The final death toll was 778. Police and investigators determined that this was not a mass suicide, but a mass murder. That the 5 principal leaders organized the murder of their followers, and whether the leadership committed suicide or escaped remains unknown. Now, the People's Temple is the most famous of all doomsday cults that resulted in a mass suicide or mass murder. Most people know the People's Temple as the Jim Jones cult, or know it through the location of the tragedy, Jonestown. Jones began his church in 1954 in Indianapolis, and he called it the Community Unity Church. He then renamed it in 1956 to Wings of Deliverance, and then later in the same year to the People's Temple Full Gospel Church. And Jones preached about nuclear holocaust and moved the church around a lot, and finally moved it to California in an attempt to find a place to avoid nuclear blasts and fallout. Why California came into his mind, I have no idea. But ultimately, this did lead him to Guyana in Africa, and he called it the People's Temple Agricultural Project, or more commonly, Jonestown. By 1978, over 900 people lived at Jonestown. On November 17, 1978, Congressman Leo Ryan was in Jonestown investigating abuse charges. With him were legal aides, reporters, and concerned families of cult members. When he left for the airport, People's Temple guards intercepted Ryan and shot him. 3 other journalists and a defector from the temple. Congressman Ryan is the only congressman ever to be murdered in the line of duty. Now, I was actually going to show a video of the attack. NBC journalist Bob Brown was actually the first person shot, and as he was shot, he dropped his camera. He was videotaping them loading the luggage onto the plane. His camera landed sideways on the ground, and you could see the gunman getting off of the truck and taking everybody out. But apparently, those of us that live in Alabama are much more technologically advanced than you in Kansas, because it doesn't work on your laptops. So, unfortunately, I cannot show the video. It won't work. But the video, let's see, I already said that. So, the following evening is when Jones ordered his congregation to drink cyanide-laced grape Kool-Aid. A total of 918 people died, including 270 children. Jonestown held the record of greatest American lives lost in a single incident until 9/11. Now, my father-in-law was there to help clean up the bodies. He's talked about it, And I'll decline to repeat what he has said in his experience because it's much more graphic than any photo I've put up here so far. The most famous example in more modern times is the Branch Davidians, led by charismatic leader David Koresh. The Davidians are a sect of Seventh-day Adventists, but the main Seventh-day Adventist church actually disfellowships anyone that becomes a Davidian. The Davidians were major advocates of apocalypticism and believed they were living in end times. Suspicion grew over Koresh when state workers investigating child abuse and child molestation claims were denied entry, causing the local sheriff to become involved and ultimately federal agents. It was during this initial investigation that intelligence revealed that Koresh was stockpiling weapons, and the ATF and FBI were brought into the investigation. On February 28, 1993, ATF agents attempted to serve a search warrant on the complex, and a gun battle was initiated by the Davidians, killing 4 ATF agents and 6 Branch Davidians. Now again, I was actually going to show the video of the attempt to serve that warrant and the carnage that resulted, but that's okay. The attempt to serve the warrant and the subsequent siege reinforced Koresh's idea of living in end times, and David Koresh told negotiators that the agents and APCs, etc., were all part of Revelation. He attributed APC tanks to the fire-breathing dragons of Revelation. His end times fervor was exacerbated by the government's presence. 50 days later, the government lost its patience and attempted to enter the compound again using APCs. The Davidians lit the facility on fire and destroyed it, killing 76 people, including Koresh. In addition to the adults who made a choice to be there, over 20 children were killed. Now, recordings from hidden microphones revealed Davidians pouring flammable liquids throughout the compound and talking about not having any more propane tanks to use. Koresh killed his followers rather than go to jail. Marshall Applewhite claimed to have a near-death experience in the early 1970s. He believed that he and his nurse, Nurse Betty, were the two mentioned in Revelations. Applewhite combined Christianity with science fiction and New Age woo-woo and formed Heaven's Gate. The group believed that the earth was going to be recycled and that the only way to avoid death was to escape the earth. Applewhite claimed that a spaceship was behind the Hale-Bopp comet and it would capture the souls of Heaven's Gate members that committed suicide. He convinced 38 followers to do it. Applewhite, along with his followers, were found dead in their rented mansion on March 26, 1997. Autopsies revealed that they used cyanide and arsenic with phenobarbital mixed with pudding or applesauce and then washed it down with vodka. The members also had plastic bags wrapped around their heads to induce asphyxiation. All of the members were laid out in their beds with a purple cloth covering their face and were all dressed in matching black shirts, sweatpants, and new black and white Nike Windrunners. Each member had an arm patch that read, Heaven's Gate Away Team. Interestingly, not all of the members committed suicide at the same time. According to autopsies, 15 of them committed suicide on the 24th, 15 more on the 25th, and the remaining 9 on the 26th. The dedication to still kill yourself after watching others do it before you is a testament to the brainwashing power and manipulation of cults and charismatic leaders and those that hold authority over the gullible. This is a great example of what's called the pot committed fallacy, which is when you've put so much money into the poker pot, even though you know you're going to lose the hand, you keep playing and betting more. They invested so much into it at this point that they had to follow it through. They weren't going to back out. The self-fulfillment of prophecy is what really makes groups like these scary. Now, the FBI actually has plans in place for major predictions, such as December 21st, 2012. Now, the plans are not there because the FBI thinks the world is actually going to end. They're there because the FBI is worried that believers will do something stupid. For example, in the lead-up to the year 2000 hysteria, a Christian group named Concerned Christians decided that to bring about the second coming, they had to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Israeli Mossad found them and arrested them on January 3rd, 1999, before they could carry out their mission. And according to the Mossad, several groups were trying to destroy the mosque in order to bring about the second coming. Look, history is rife with apocalyptic fears, predicted raptures, and the end of the world. As far back as 2800 BCE, an Assyrian tablet claimed the world was coming to an end. Now, Jesus believed the end was near. Yes, David Fitzgerald, I know he didn't exist. I'm speaking metaphorically. He is quoted in saying in Matthew 16:28, Mark 13:30, Luke 21:32, and Matthew 24:34, and several variations thereof, verily I say unto you, there be some standing here which shall not taste of death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Clearly, Jesus was a failed prophet. Luckily now, he's a successful prophet. In 247 CE, many Romans thought the end of the world was coming because Rome was celebrating its 1,000th birthday. St. Martin of Tours wrote around 390 CE, there is no doubt that the Antichrist has already been born. Firmly established already in his early years, he will, after reaching maturity, achieve supreme power. In 500 CE, Sextus Julius Africanus determined that the end of the world would occur 6,000 years after creation. He figured out that there were 5,331 years between creation and the resurrection of Jesus, so the second coming had to be in 500. He later revised it to 800 when it failed to happen in 500. I guess he thought that if he wasn't alive when it didn't happen a second time, nobody would blame him. The Lotharingians were worried when the Annunciation and Good Friday fell on the same day, on March 25th, 970. They believed that every major event in Christian history occurred on the 25th of March. Adam's birth, Jesus' conception, etc. So it was obvious to them that the world would end on March 25th. And of course, the year 1000 caused numerous problems across Christendom, just along the same lines that we saw in the year 2000 here in modern times. Pope Innocent III expected the second coming to take place in 1284, exactly 666 years after the formation of Islam. He's a really weird-looking dude, isn't he? Yeah. April 28th, 1583 was predicted by numerous astrologers to be the end of the world or the second coming because of the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. Astrologer Richard Harvey even dared to give the exact time of the second coming, precisely at noon, because how nice of Jesus to interrupt our lunch. Martin Luther predicted the end of the world would occur in 1600. At least we can give him credit for the Reformation. And Christopher Columbus was an end-of-the-world believer. In his Book of Prophecies, he determined that the world was created in 5343 BCE, and that the world only would last 7,000 years. So the end of the world would be in 1658. And of course, the year 1666 was a huge burden for Londoners because it was 1,000 years after the birth of Jesus, plus the mark of the beast. And there was actual war leading up to 1606, adding to the hysteria. And in addition, the Great Fire of London, pictured here, was in 1666. That did not help console the fears over into the world for Londoners. But luckily, Londoners lived to see 1667. Well, the ones that lived beyond the fire, anyways. John Wesley, founder of the Methodist Church, foresaw that the second coming would be in 1846. And Jehovah's Witnesses made their first incorrect prediction for the second coming to occur in 1874. And they tried again in 1878, 1881, 1910, 1914, 1918, 1925, 1941, 1975, 1984, 1990. And their batting average is dismal, to say the least. Because at first you don't succeed, try again. No, keep trying. One more time. Okay, try harder. Now try again. Keep trying. Come on, you can do it. Try again. One more time. Okay, maybe next time. Joseph Smith, founder of Mormonism, and the second coming would occur in 1891. I knew that would go over well. Do you think Smith chose the angel Moroni on purpose as a way to pick on the gullible people that believed in him? Do I have to let that sink in for the people that don't get it? Yeah. May 18th, 1910 marked the return of Halley's Comet and the return of many lunatics claiming it would mark the end of the world, second coming of the rise of the Antichrist. And in 1950, Billy Graham, yes, that Billy Graham, stated that we only had a year or two left before, quote unquote, it was over. And yet here we are 59 years later, no Antichrist, no rapture, no second coming, and yet we still have Billy Graham. Where is the justice? According to psychic and astrologer Gene Dixon, a planetary alignment would bring destruction to the planet on February 4th, 1962. The Antichrist would be born on the day after. Now, Miss Dixon had the ears of the Reagan White House. Nancy was a huge fan of hers, and there were rumors that President Reagan consulted her numerously before making foreign policy decisions. The Nation of Islam predicted an apocalyptic battle to occur sometime between 1965 and 66, and the result would be the destruction of the United States. Reverend Sun Myung Moon said that the kingdom of heaven was established on earth in 1967, later changed it to 1981. He learned his lesson and has not made a public prediction since. In May of 1980, Pat Robertson predicted on the 700 Club that the end of the world would happen in the fall of 1982. Luckily, he raised $3 million, shaved his nose hair, and the world was saved. Hal Lindsey's book, The Late Great Planet Earth, said the rapture would take place in 1988 because that would be 40 years after Israel gained statehood. Lindsey, of course, would go on to co-create one of the best-selling Rapture series books, Left Behind, which turned into a movie starring everybody's favorite banana boy, Kirk Cameron. In 1991, Louis Farrakhan swore that Operation Desert Storm would result in War of Armageddon, which is the final war. Members of the Aryan Nation thought that April 29th, 1992, was a sign of the final apocalyptic race war. Now, it was the day of the LA riots after the Rodney King police beating trial. And this idea was heightened for them when black residents turned their rage towards Korean residents and businesses. Fortunately for Angelenos and unfortunately for the Aryans, things finally chilled out. I was actually in Paris, France when this happened, and I woke up in the morning to not only soft, puffy pastries, but to a newspaper that said L'Embarras Amérique, the American embarrassment. It was quite humiliating to be an American in Europe on this day. Not like any other day that would be embarrassing to be an American. It was a little more embarrassing than normal. 1999 was a big year for the crazies. Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, followers of the George Washington prediction dream, psychic Gene Dixon said Prussians would invade the U.S. and start World War III. Edgar Casey claimed a pole shift would happen and that World War III would start. Charles Berlitz predicted nuclear devastation or a meteor impact. Dole Dormer's self-proclaimed incarnation of Christ predicted President Clinton would bring about the end of the world by releasing a biological weapon. But she thought Clinton was the Antichrist. Now, you never know. He still has time left to do his dirty work. I mean, after all, he did marry Hillary. And Hal Lindsey made another appearance by predicting that the Russians would invade Israel in 1999 because the Bible says the eagle, the USA, and the dragon, China, would defeat the bear, Russia. And numerologist H.J. Hoekstra predicted the rapture, and then Father Charles Moore appeared on the Art Bell show saying that he heard the third secret of Fatima and that the asteroid would strike Earth on June 30th. Nostradamus followers were ecstatic about July of 1999 because of this quatrain. The year 1999, 7 months, from the sky will come the great king of terror to bring back the life of the great king of the Mongols, before and after Mars, to reign by good luck. Reign of fire and good luck just do not seem to go together. The Branch Davidians predicted the return of David Koresh on August 6, 1999, exactly 2,300 days after Koresh's death, based on their interpretation of Daniel 8:14. The Japanese doomsday cult Aum Shinrikyo predicted that Judgment Day would fall on September 3rd. Now, that cult would become famous thanks to its sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway. And Jack Van Impe, one of the craziest of the crazies, predicted the second coming and rapture for October of 1999. And the predictions and nonsense for the year 2000 are entirely too numerous to mention. Something about 3 zeros combined makes people crazy. Most of us remember the Y2K scare. I mean, I remember laughing at the believers in the Y2K scare and laughing even harder at them when no planes fell from the sky and the zombie apocalypse didn't happen. And that brings us to Harold Camping, which is why we're here in the first place. I mean, since he is the one that predicted May 21st as the rapture. Now, Harold first predicted that the rapture would occur on September 27th, 1994. Did anybody not see Skyline and not get that? Ugh. When it failed to happen, because Skyline was the actual rapture. When it failed to happen, he changed it to just 2 days later, to September 29th. But alas, nobody flew up to heaven. So he changed it to October 2nd. Well, clearly that didn't work. So he figured Jesus needed a few more months and changed it to March 31st of 95. And then he shut up and gave his church and his ministry some time to heal and garner new followers. Now, he no longer set dates and just said they were, quote, living in end times. But then out of the blue last year, he named another date, May 21st, 2011, and here we are. But wait, there's more. Did you know that Sir Isaac Newton, yes, that Sir Isaac Newton, made an end-of-the-world prediction? In a letter written in 1704, Newton used figures from the book of Daniel to state that the apocalypse could not occur any earlier than the year 2060. Whew, lucky for us, right? But our kids are fucked. And did you know that there's an actual rapture index? That's right. You too can know exactly how you should be reacting to how worried you should be about the end times and Jesus coming back for some kick-ass. The Rapture Index and meter are based on global indicators such as false Christ, the occult, Satanism, drug abuse, moral standards, anti-Christian behavior, that would be us, false prophets, mark of the beast, climate plagues, etc. And as of May 9th of this year, the Rapture Index was 182. Does that mean anything to you? No. So let's figure out what the hell 182 means. Now, an RI of 100 or below means slow or little prophetic activity. Go ahead, drink the margarita, piddle the choir boy, plenty of time to repent. An RI of 101 to 130 means moderate prophetic activity. You can still have a quickie, but keep a close eye on the RI. And an RI of 131 to 160 means heavy prophetic activity. Now might be a good time to go to confession or be born again. And an RI of 161 and above means, according to the Rapture Index site, fasten your seatbelts. It's time to jump on the Jesus Express. Now, I think Charles Schulz said it best. Don't worry about the world coming to an end today. It's already tomorrow in Australia. Now, predictions of the rapture, second coming, birth of the Antichrist, Armageddon, and the end of the world have been made for eons, and none of them have panned out. One would think that sooner or later they would get a clue that it's never going to happen unless they result in self-fulfilling prophecy. When the mindset of Armageddon belief controls government policy, then that belief can manifest itself in foreign and domestic policy and result in putting countries in situations that could very well bring about the apocalypse, which would be seen by varying religions as their end times. The concern over self-fulfilling prophecy groups have placed many law enforcement agencies in the odd situation of preparing for the end times, not at the hand of deities, but at the hands of the frickin' lunatics who believe in those deities. Armageddonism is not just a silly belief. It is a dangerous belief that could very well affect government policy and place us exactly where they want us to be, facing Armageddon against the forces of evil. Until the general population accepts the fact that rational politician is better than a religious one, we place ourselves in the situation of forcing ourselves into Armageddon to fulfill some ancient, silly superstition written by Bronze Age nomads doing their best to understand the world without the benefit of science. And yet here we are, still caving in overall to those Bronze Age superstitions and non-scientific ramblings of xenophobic, homophobic, genocidal desert nomads. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but after 2,000 plus years of fastening your seatbelts and any fucking day now, I'm ready for the rest of the world to get off this fucking roller coaster, just like I did when I was fucking 13 years old. Thank you very much.